Hello and welcome to Digital Photo Mentor Live. Today I'm Darlene and today I'm going to be demonstrating photo editing for beginners using Luminar Neo. Luminar Neo is a program that I highly recommend if you are new to photo editing. It's easier to use than many of the other options out there, especially the Adobe ones like Lightroom and Photoshop. Before I get started, though, give yourself an introduction in the chat. If you are joining in for the first time, please tell us where you are joining from. I am located in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I'd love to know where you are located. Also, please let me know. We've had some issues with syncing of the microphone and the sound. Let me know if my lips match the sound coming out. We've got some of our regulars already in here. I see we've got, well, Rob, of course. He is my webmaster and aka husband. So he's always here. Stovoker, where are you from? Are you joining us for the first time? Lee is a regular visitor and a community member. So we know Lee quite well. NetTube user, hello. Deb from Eagle River, Tom in Calgary, Maryland, welcome. Sync is working well. Awesome. Okay. Good news. France. Well, bienvenue. My French is a little bit rusty and my Spanish is better, but bienvenue to the live stream. Seem to be a go. Pink waving hand. Mickey. Hello, Mickey. Welcome. All right. So looks like I'm functioning at a good capacity here. And what I want to do today is I've got several different things that I want to talk about. And then in terms of beginning photo editing, and if you've been doing photo editing for a while, this may be a review for you, or you may learn something. So let me just hop over into Luminar and we'll get started. So this is what Luminar looks like if you are brand new and you've not done anything yet. I've already added, of course, a number of images and folders of images. So that is something that you would do to begin. I'm not going to get into adding photos today. I can do that, but I want to talk about the actual editing process. So if people want to see how to add photos to Luminar, we can do that. So this is totally going to be directed by you guys and what you want to learn, but I have a few basic concepts that I would like to cover. So let me just look at my notes here. I do have notes for myself. So the first thing is we're going to talk about what is a catalog-based or data-based type of photo editor. So Luminar is such an editor. So you'll notice that all of the images are added in here. I can see all of my photos in one place. I can sort them. I can filter them based on different things, such as I can look for all of my photos that were taken with a particular camera. Right. Now you'll notice that I have many different cameras here, and that's because I don't use all of those cameras. Right. I think it just puts in all kinds of different things in here as options, but I believe these are ones that are also from people who have submitted images for my live stream. So I've got some of your potential images as well. So I can look at different file formats and so on. Okay. Also by date. So I can say, okay, when I want to see all my images from this year. Okay. So that's what a database is. All your images come in, and where the edits are stored is inside the database. Okay. So it's a catalog, like I said, a catalog based program. I'm just going to make myself a little bit bigger for this first part. There we go. So it's a catalog-based program, meaning that you don't open one image, edit it, save it, and then close it. Okay, you can edit multiple images at one time with copy and pasting edits, syncing edits from one to others, and so on. And you don't have to do anything to save your edits. It's all saved inside of what's called the catalog file or the database. Okay, when you're working with Luminar, you can have one catalog or you can have multiple catalogs. For me, okay, I have a few, and my recent ones will show up here. Okay, so I have two that I work with. My course catalog, so for my Luminar Neo course where I teach Luminar Neo from start to finish, and my own personal catalog with some of my own images and for other purposes. Okay. But for beginners, I would recommend just having one catalog to start so that you don't confuse yourself. Okay. We can also take a look at where is the catalog. Okay. So under the file menu, now I'm on a Mac, so your menus might look slightly different, and you may have to click on this logo here to see some of these options. Okay. So if you don't see file, click on the logo and you should see the options underneath the pull down that appears. Okay. So file, catalog, and for me, show in Finder. Okay. So when that pops up, comes up on my other screen. Okay. So if you see me looking over, where am I? There. If you see me looking over there, that's just my other monitor. Okay. So this is my catalog, right, for the course. Okay. So you can see that it's called Luminar Neo Course Catalog and the size of it. And it also comes with a history and some backups that are done automatically, but backing up your catalog is twofold, and I'll show you about that as well. Okay, so you want to back up your images and your catalog, and that is a bit more of a process than what's done here automatically. Ideally, you want to have your catalog in your pictures folder or photos. If you're on Windows, it might be called photos, on your actual internal hard drive. So one of the things that I've had some of my students run into issues is if their photos are or their pictures folder is being backed up to something like OneDrive or iCloud, you can run into problems because it thinks that it actually is like your pictures folder is actually not on your hard drive. It's on the cloud somewhere. Okay. So you can run into problems with that. So I don't recommend using any of those automatic backups to back up your pictures folder for that reason, because it can cause issues with the database type of photo editor, including Lightroom. So if you're using Lightroom, which is also a database or a catalog, can cause the same kinds of issues. Okay. So this is your catalog folder. Okay. And you can see my personal one is there. It has the same types of folders, okay, inside of it. So this is the whole catalog folder. Okay, so that's how a database works. So every time you go to edit your photo, you don't have to click save or anything like that. It's all saved automatically inside of the catalog for you. Okay, so I'm going as I go along here, I'm going to see if there's any questions, and maybe Rob can point out if there's any questions that have popped up in the chat. I don't see any right now. Yes, I already did say that at the beginning. We are doing photo editing for beginners today. So if you are brand new to photo editing, this is for you. If you've been doing editing for a while, this is going to be a good review. Okay, so let me look at my notes again. All right, so now let's get into some terms and things that you may need to know for editing that you'll need to know for editing if you haven't heard these terms before. So catalog or database is the first one. The next one I want to talk about is camera profile, and that involves getting into, let me get into my album here. So I've created an album, which is just a little virtual catalog, I guess, a virtual folder. Okay, so it's not a real folder. It's a little selection of images that I've made to demonstrate for this first part. Okay, so I'm actually going to use this image. Now, some of these you'll see have names of people that are not my images. Okay, so this was by Linda. These were all submitted for a previous live stream, and they've given their permission to use their images for demonstration purposes here on YouTube. So we thank them for doing that. Okay, so now I'm going to take the image from the catalog. Sorry, I did a quick, let me get my mouse cursor on. There we go. And it should be on green. Why is it not green? There we go. Okay, so the first thing I want to show you is to get to the edit module. Okay, there's catalog up at the top here, presets, which are some predetermined set of edits. We'll come back to those. And then there's the magic place where all of it happens, and that is edit. So when you click edit, it takes you into the section where you'll find all of the tools. Okay. Now I've collapsed them all up except for this section because we're not really going to be dealing with anything other than the first couple here just to get you started. Okay. And some basics. So the first place that you always want to go when you're editing is a tool called Develop. Okay. If you are using Lightroom or something different, okay, it may be called Essentials or Basics, but the place where you want to go is the place where it has the basic tools. Now I'm just going to collapse these up as well. Okay, so anytime you see these little down arrows, it just means that something is collapsible, right? And this is the main section we're going to be talking about today. So first of all, let's deal with some terminology now that we are in the edit module. Okay, so there's develop raw, and you see this little, let me see if I can get it to enlarge here. I'm not sure if I can. Function. Oh. Okay, I'm just trying to get my mouse to enlarge, but I can't figure out the button to do that. So sorry about that. Right here, okay, it says develop and then raw at the end here and that little blue mark. If you can't read it, that's fine. It says develop raw. So that means that I am dealing with a raw photo. So taken as a raw file in the camera. Okay, you can see her file name down the bottom here, okay, is a CR2. That is a Canon RAW file format. Okay, now when you are shooting raw in the camera, you have to edit your photos, number one, okay, but you get some benefits in Develop Raw that you don't get when you're editing a JPEG. Okay, so when you start to move from shooting JPEGs and into photo editing, you also want to transition to shooting raw files so that you get those added benefits. Okay, one of them is that you're able to use what's called a camera profile. So if you look on your camera when you're shooting, you'll have different profiles available. For example, these are the Canon ones. So camera neutral, camera faithful, standard, portrait, monochrome, and landscape. Okay. I need to make myself smaller. Down there. Rob likes sound effects, so we'll just do a little sound effect. Okay, so your camera profiles are found here where it says external. Ignore these ones at the top because I've installed Fuji ones separately because they're not automatically in there. So if you are shooting Fuji cameras, these will not appear, unfortunately. Okay, it has to do with how the Fuji cameras communicate with the RAW processor. Okay, so if you are shooting Fuji, you have to take a few extra steps to get these profiles, okay, which is what I did. But don't worry about that. It's a little bit more advanced, right? So if you're shooting any other kind of camera, in this case, Canon, when you have these external profiles available, just hover over each of them and you'll get to see a preview of how the image will look if that profile is applied. Notice landscape on this one does a great job. Okay, so what landscape profiles typically do is enhance and darken blues, punch up the greens. Okay, so that's what they're made to do. So in this case, a landscape image, it's doing a really nice job. Okay, portrait typically punches up red, so you'll notice that the barn looks brighter in this one. Okay, so once you choose one, you just have to click it to apply it. So just like choosing the profile in your camera, if you're shooting JPEG, that profile gets applied and cooked in. Whereas if you're shooting RAW, you get to choose the profile after the fact when you're editing. How cool is that? Okay, so camera profile, that's what you need to know about that term and where to find it. Another important thing that you need to know about is the histogram and the clipping warnings. Okay, so you may have heard the term histogram before. You can find it right up here on the Luminar Neo in the edit panel. And if you don't see it, it's down. You can turn it on under the view menu. Okay, so show histogram. See, it went away. And I'll turn it back on. Okay, I always edit with the histogram showing because this indicates the tones in your image. The other thing that I will often do is check for what's called the clipping warnings. Okay, now this one doesn't have any clipping, so I'm just going to find another image to show you an example of what that looks like. Okay, Also, this one is a JPEG. So I'm going to show you the difference when you edit a JPEG. So this is an image that was submitted by Russ, and you can see that it is a JPEG. Okay. Now there's a couple of different things that we notice immediately. Develop doesn't have the little raw thing at the end. Okay. That means that we've lost some of the tools inside, including Camera Raw. Okay. The other thing that we've lost, and I'll come back to this one in a minute, is white balance presets. Under here, under color, white balance, we only have one option. Okay. I'll go back to the raw files and show you that in a moment. Okay. Where this comes into play, as mentioned, the clipping warnings and turning them on, I use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Okay. So to turn on the clipping warnings, you just press J on your keyboard. Now you see these little dots on the histogram here highlighted. Okay. So the right side of the histogram is your highlights or whites, and the left side is blacks and all the tones in between. Now you'll see clipping warnings. So anything that shows red, like this here, means that it's clipping off the side of the graph on the right. It's too far that way, okay? It's too far to the right, meaning there's no detail in this area. So it's white plus brighter. Okay, so immediately we know we're going to have to try and deal with that because there's not going to be any detail in these rocks. Okay, so that's a hint as to what you're going to want to photo edit. So I always check for clipping warnings. Okay, let's look at another example of the opposite problem. Okay, so this image is too dark. Okay, we see that visually. But the other problem is that if your computer monitor is not properly calibrated for brightness, okay, you may be falsely editing your images. Okay, so if this one looks okay on your screen may be too bright. Okay, so if your screen is set too bright, you're not going to fix this problem. Okay, but if you look at this histogram and you see that it's all pushed over to the left, that tells you that it's underexposed. There's nothing medium gray or white here at all. So this is a very underexposed image based on the histogram. Rob, could you please share the Snow is Gray article in the chat, please? So check the article that Rob's about to share in the chat, and it'll explain a little bit more about the histogram and the clippings, okay? But I'm going to turn the clipping warnings on here, and you'll see what happens now. Okay, now we don't have any red notices. We've got blue notices, and that means shadow clipping. Okay, so if you have a lot of shadow clipping, it means your image is really dark. So again, this one would tell you, okay, there's nothing white clipping, but we do have lots of blue, which means black clipping or off the edge of the graph and no detail. So that also tells me that's where I need to focus and brighten this image. Okay, so that's where Develop Raw comes in. Right, notice now again, we're back to a raw file and we have the camera profiles again. So let me turn the clipping warnings off with the keyboard shortcut again, J. Okay, if you'd like to get a copy of my free PDF Luminar Neo keyboard shortcut, just click on the link. Rob's going to put a link in the chat for that as well. Rob's going to be busy with links today, and I just sprung this one on him. If you're watching the replay on this, you'll be able to find the links to things in the description area below. So anytime I mention a link, you'll find it there as well afterwards. Okay, let me get back over here. Okay, so the keyboard shortcuts PDF you can print out and have handy as you're editing. Okay, so on this one, I'm just going to brighten it a little bit with the exposure slider, and then we'll take a look at the camera profiles. Okay, so you could see again, the camera profiles are making a big difference in terms of look. I think in this one, actually, Adobe Standard does a really nice job. So you notice just by changing the profile and brightening the image a little bit, it's hugely better, okay? Lots better. You can see the histogram is starting to spread out, okay? Let me just check my notes here. Okay, a couple other things. I'm going to come back to the catalog module, okay? Again, keyboard shortcuts. I use these a lot. If you want to get from edit back to catalog, you just press L for library, okay? I don't know why they call it library and then up top it's catalog, you know, confusing. Yes, so the keyboard shortcut is L for library, okay? I want to bring your attention to this upper right panel here. Okay, so this one shows your camera metadata. Okay, so it shows the camera that used to take it, the date, and the exposure information as well. You could see that it is a raw file. You can also do some basic things here like favorite an image or even rotate it right from this screen. Right, so this is your metadata panel in the catalog. Okay, metadata is just information that is embedded in your image when you take it. So it's camera data from the original camera, right? Whether you're shooting JPEG, here's a JPEG, right, that we looked at a minute ago. Now you can see the same thing, camera, exposure information, okay? As long as it's the original from the camera, it will show you that data. Okay. Let's go back into develop. And a couple more things I just want to show you. And some of them are a bit more advanced. I'm not going to be covering all of those things today, but just so that you know what they are, okay? Over on the left, you'll see something called layers. Now, you may have heard of layers in photo editing in the past, and what you can do with layers is multifaceted, okay? You can use it for corrections, or you can use layers to make special effects and things. So let me just show you a few things that I've demonstrated in lessons in my course. Okay, so my Luminar Neo course covers all of these things in great detail. We only have maybe an hour and a half together today, and I'm going to cover as much as I can, but of course I can't cover the grand scope of photo editing in its entirety in an hour and a half. Okay, so that's why I've created my Luminar Neo course, which is a full start to finish, learn Luminar Neo, learn photo editing, and all of the things that you can do. For example, you can do multiple exposures, you can do special effects on the background, grunge edges, and so on. These are all things that have been done with layers, right? You can also do things like combining images. For example, this one looks like one image, right? Wrong. I added the campfire, the smoke, and the moon. Okay, so you can make composite images with layers. Okay. In this case, I added the reflection and the skateboarder using layers. And what that looks like is this. Okay, so you have multiple layers over here with the various different components. Okay. As I said, layers are a bit more advanced. Well, they're a lot more advanced and not something I'm going to be covering in any more detail in this course, in this lesson today. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is global edits versus local edits. So let me do a few more examples here. Okay. So this one was submitted by Ed Barbieri quite some time ago. And again, it's a raw file. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to head to Develop Raw and pick the camera profile. Let's try landscape. Wow. Look at that. Okay. Remember how I said that landscape profiles really pick up the blue and the green? It's done a great job there, right? Now let's check our clipping warnings. Okay, so what this tells me is we've got a lot of contrast. So we've got some clipping in the shadows and in the highlights, okay? If we want to have detail in that water, we're not getting it right now, okay? So now we have a choice, right? I can bring down the highlights, and these are also areas that I cover in the course as well, each of these sliders. So when I cover the develop tool, I go slider by slider, okay? So exposure is brightness, but it's based on the midtones, okay? So we're going to do these ones quickly. Highlights are areas that are bright, but not quite white. So if you're looking at the histogram, white is over here on the right, highlights are here. So see where that spike is? It's actually a perfect area where highlights are located on the graph. So it's those areas that are not quite white. Okay, now we do have some clipping. So I'm going to bring the highlights down, okay, all the way. Now, mostly I've gotten rid of that clipping problem, okay, but there's still a little bit more clipping. So I could darken the image overall, okay, until I get rid of it. But then we have a problem with the dark areas and the image is too dark. So now we come into something called local adjustments. Okay. So if you want to do local adjustments, then you need to use the masking tools inherent in built into the Luminar Neo. Okay. Now you'll notice that to develop raw tool, there's nothing here that says masking. Okay. So there's a trick. If you need to mask with a develop tool, you have to apply another tool first. This is a thing that trips up a lot of beginners, right? So they start off with develop raw, everything's going great. Then they do another tool. So I'm just going to add some structure. Okay. So just to punch up the contrast, see what that does. Just going to add a little bit of structure. Okay. Now, what happened to develop? It doesn't say develop raw anymore. See that? So what happens is if you apply a different tool on top of develop raw or as a first tool, okay, develop raw is then not available anymore, but you can still use develop. And when you open it now, look what we have. So there's no camera profile anymore, but we do have masking. Okay. And you can always get back to develop raw. So again, here's another thing that's a little bit confusing. We are in the edit module, but inside this module, there's two tabs. There's the tools tab where we find all of the things to edit the images. And then we have edits, which is kind of like the history. Okay. So if you've used Lightroom or other programs where there's a history listing all the steps you've done, that's over here. Okay. And if you look, we can see develop raw is at the bottom. Likewise, there's a noiseless raw, which is another one that applies on raw files only, or applies to raw files and then disappears if you apply things on top. Okay. So we don't need noise reduction on this one. It's not got any grain or issues. But if we open develop raw, you can see our edits are still there, including the camera profile. Okay. But now that I've applied structure, I can go back to tools and do develop again. And this time I can use masking. So now I want to darken a little bit. I'm going to turn the clipping warnings on, but I only want it to apply to this middle section. I don't want to darken the whole image. So we can go to masking. So this is what's called a local adjustment. So a global adjustment applies to the entire image. A local adjustment applies to only part of the image. And inside the masking tools, there's various different ways of selecting which part of the image you want to mask. Okay. Now I could try object select and see if it picks up water, or I could try mask AI, and so on. But the easiest way is radial gradient, right? In this one, because it allows you to draw a circle or an oval around something. So when you click, you see this little crosshairs. I'm just going to click and drag and it makes a circle, but then you can make it a different shape. Okay, so I just want this area. You can also rotate it. Okay, so I don't want the sky. I can also change the fade or this outer part. So it fades, meaning it's not so, oops, I need to get it smaller. Let me get it a little rounder. There we go. Okay, so the fade is where the effect is 100% in the middle and 0% on the outside. This is the fade area. So how quickly it fades. So I want it to go from effect to no effect faster. So I'm lowering the fade. Okay, so now I'm just going to place it so I get mostly the water, like so. Right? So where you see the red is where this effect, this tool is going to apply. Okay, so now when I go back to adjustments, I kind of have a little bit of a mess because it's darkening that whole inner area, but it's actually not bad. And you can see that it's dealing with the highlight on the water. So I might bring the exposure up instead, so it's not darkening the gray part too much, and instead just bring the highlights down. So this eyeball here is a before and after just of this tool. Okay. If you want to see a before and after of the whole thing, there's options down here. You can click and hold the eyeball. You can click this one to get the before and after slider like this. Or my favorite, which is just to hold down the backslash key. So it shows before and after. Okay. So now we've got the original image and after. So really quickly, just by using Develop Raw, another tool on top, and then Develop Raw again, masked to just the water, we've created a really nice image and edit on this one. Okay, so any questions about terms or the beginning steps? Let's see. Great to see some new names. Fireworks, awesome. Fireworks in France, that's great. Rob, if you want to do some extra work, we've got firework tips articles if you want to share for them in the chat. Luminar Neo keyboard. Oh, thank you so much. I love that you love it. How often might a beginner need to use a second layer? Very rare. I would say layers are something that you will use later on in your journey of learning. Let me just show you the Luminar Neo course and how you can get it. And it is at 30% off right now. So we're having a special relaunch sale. I redid the entire course for 2025. So starting in like November, and I just finished it about a month ago. So I've re-recorded 44 or 45 lessons covering every single tool in Luminar Neo right from the beginning. I talk about things like we did at the beginning here today, the catalog, backing up, using layers, using all of the tools, masking, and so on. Okay. So this sale ends tomorrow night at midnight. Our time, so Mountain Standard Time. So if you want to get 30% off the course, it's regular 97. You can grab it for 67 right now. If you are watching the replay on this one, check the description area below. If you've missed out on the time frame, there may be a coupon for you to get a smaller discount in the description area below. So check that. Okay, let's get back to our lessons here. Okay, so the next thing, we already talked about RAW versus JPEG in terms of develop RAW and the camera profile, but there's a few other places where it comes into play as well. Okay, so let me just grab this image here. Okay, so here's another one. We can turn on the clipping warnings, again, the J keyboard shortcut, and you can see that a lot of the sky is indeed clipping. Once again, we can start with Develop Raw, and let's just choose one of these presets. I actually think I'm going to turn the clipping warnings off. Oops. I'm going to turn the clipping warnings off because I think there was one that, yeah, one of it gave me a bit more detail in the sky. Let's go with camera neutral. Okay, so it's still clipping, but if I bring the overall exposure down a little bit, and the highlights down, look at how much detail there is in the sky. So this is the other thing about working with a raw file versus a JPEG, okay? When we look at the original, it looks like there's nothing there in the sky, right? But because we're working with a raw file, it gives you much more latitude in what you can do with it, okay? If I try and do that same thing with this one here that's a JPEG, okay, with develop, I can bring the overall exposure down a little bit. Let's check the clippings. Oh, I think I might have fixed it. Right, so let's bring the clipping warnings or the highlights all the way down. Okay, now, even though it shows, yes, it's got the clippings under control, do you see any detail here? Okay, that's the problem. Before and after. And I can continue to keep going darker, and there's never going to be any detail in here. See, it's a big sort of white blob. That's the difference between RAW and JPEG. So we have some latitude with a JPEG, and you can see that we can pull the clipping warnings down, but we're never going to get that detail back. Not like I did with that snowy scene just a minute ago. Okay, you're never going to get, oops, I went the wrong way, that. Right? So if you want to have more detail and more flexibility in your editing, make sure you're shooting RAW. If that's something that's scary, shoot RAW and JPEG until you get your workflow down. Okay, but just know that editing a RAW file and editing a JPEG work exactly the same in Luminar. You just have less tools available to you when you're shooting a JPEG. Okay, now I showed you the color option a minute ago. So if you go down to the color option in Develop Raw, okay, so each of these is a whole section. Okay, there's lots to learn about all of these tools inside just the develop tool, okay? But color is where you'll find the white balance, sliders, and adjusters, as well as this little eyedropper. So I'll come back to that one in a minute, okay? But when you pull this menu down here, okay, now we have presets. So these are very similar or the same to what you have on your camera. So if you're shooting with a raw file, the white balance presets are available to you afterward as well. So just like the camera profiles, now we have the white balance profiles, okay? So you can see that changing them changes the color, okay? You can also use this little eyedropper and click on something that is neutral in your scene. You could do that with a JPEG as well, okay? Now, snow should be fairly neutral, right? You have to pick an area that's not in deep total shadow. So I'm going to try one about here, okay? You could see with the squares, the target, and what it's doing is when I click on this area, whatever is underneath there that you see in those squares in the grid, it's going to try and neutralize that color. So if it sees beige, like it does in this case, it's going to try and remove it and neutralize that area. See what it did? Okay. However, if you click on something that is not neutral, like this road, see that's brown, it's still going to try and neutralize that area, but it's going to go too far the opposite direction. So it's going to take out like yellow and orange, and we're going to end up with a very blue image. But when you're working with an image like this, for example, actually anytime, you are the creator here. So you get to decide and you have artistic license to decide, do you want it warmer or do you want it cooler? Because when you're dealing with a winter scene, sometimes cooler is actually better because it makes it feel cold, right? So when I say cooler or warmer, that's on this temperature slider here. So blue is cooler, yellow is warmer, okay? Think about thinking about a flame doesn't work because technically a blue flame is the hottest, right? So it's just about what those colors feel like, right? Tint is green versus magenta, okay? So you can adjust the color of the image using the pull down, the eyedropper, or the sliders. Another thing, let me come back to a different image here. Another thing that trips up beginners a lot is the difference between saturation and vibrance. I'm just going to choose a camera profile for this bird. Now notice that even though he's not a landscape, you can still use the landscape profile. Look at the difference between portrait. It brightens the bag, okay? So keep thinking in mind of landscape is trees and sky, but it's really green and blue. So portrait is lightening the blue, landscape is darkening. So I want to minimize that garbage bag, so I'm going to go with landscape, okay? When we look at the clipping warnings, the background is clipping, but in this case, I'm okay with that because it's the sun and it's really bright. So I'm going to actually just brighten the bird a little bit overall, okay? Another trick is if you want more intense color, first of all, let's look at these color sliders, okay, is you need to add black. I'll show you that in a second. Okay, so we can play around with different white balances, right? Make him cooler, make him warmer, right? I kind of like the shade one, and let's push the orange a lot. So we've pushed that really up high, right? So shade was pretty good, right? The difference between saturation and vibrance is where people get tripped up. Okay, so saturation is the intensity of color. So watch what happens when I increase this. All colors are increased in intensity equally. Okay, notice what's happening to his eye and the oranges and yellows here. Okay, so they're becoming really intense to the point of garishness. Okay, when you go the opposite direction, 100% minus 100% saturation is a black and white image, but that's not the best way to make a black and white. Okay, but zero saturation means no color, right? Vibrance, however, is a little bit different. It affects colors intensity, but only certain colors. Watch what happens if I take this one to the max. Notice how it's not going quite as far, okay? His eye is not over the top, okay? And it's affecting lighter, more pale or understated colors. Okay, so if we go to minus 100 vibrance, we don't get a pure black and white image. Okay, so vibrance affects the lesser saturated or less intense colors. Okay, but it only takes them to a certain point. saturation affects all colors equally, and it goes all the way to 0 in terms of minus 100. Right? So the difference between saturation and vibrance. But I mentioned a moment ago, if you want more color in your image, I almost never increase the saturation slider. The only time I use this slider is to take it to the minus side and take some saturation out. Because one of the things that happens is very common to beginner mistakes when photo editing is going over the top with their editing. And one of those problems is oversaturation. Okay, so if we make an image that looks like this, I'm just going to show you what over editing looks like. Okay, that's what over editing looks like. Okay, and if you take my course or watched any of my videos in the past, I call this neon puke. Okay, my eyes, I can't stand looking at this. Okay, so don't make neon puke if you can avoid it. Right, so take your edits and keep them a bit more subtle. Right, so if you want a bit more intensity of color, watch this. Okay, when you increase the blacks, meaning you take the black slider to the minus side, watch the histogram. See, it's pulling that left side over. Okay, you're literally just affecting the blacks. Let's see how it applies on a different image. Let's come to this one, actually. Okay, so here's one that was submitted by Danelle a while back. So we can do all the same things again. We can pick the camera profile, which makes a huge difference, right? And I could darken the image a little bit, but I don't want to go too dark because then the foreground's too dark. But those mountains are kind of faded out, right? So watch what happens, like the color, when they're kind of faded and foggy, there's no color there. There's no intensity of color. But watch what happens when I add black, right? See that? The mountains are affected by that. Now, there's actually a slider in one of the other tools that is great for scenarios like this, okay? I'm going to come down to one down here in the landscape section, okay? And that is the landscape tool and dehaze. Dehaze is a brilliant slider that works great on, surprisingly enough, landscape images. So when you have haze like this, notice it's not affecting the foreground as much. Okay, but all it's doing really is it's finding the hazy area and applying more black, just like I did above. Okay, another one that's really good after Develop Raw is Enhance AI. Okay, so this one incorporates artificial intelligence to analyze your image to figure out what edits it needs. Okay, so it's not generating anything fake, it's just figuring out what your image needs. Look at that. Okay, so Accent AI does a great job on the mountains, and then Sky AI, Sky Enhancer, pulls down the sky. So let's see where we got into just with Develop Raw. I'm going to get rid of landscape here. You can delete any of your edits that you're not using. So camera profile, darken a little bit, and Enhance AI really brings out those mountains. Okay, so Enhance AI is often the second tool that you want to go to after you do Develop. Okay, these are in the essentials section for a reason. Okay, so these are ones that you need to use all the time. All right, let's go back a little bit and let's talk about how do you know what to edit in your image? Where do you begin? How do you know what you need to do? Okay, so in the case of this one, I used the clipping warnings to tell me which part I needed to edit or fix. Okay, so sometimes you need to fix things and sometimes you just need to enhance them a little bit. But what if you have something like this? Okay, oops, well, I made a mess because my camera sensor was really dirty. Okay, so I can still use Develop Raw here, and I can still pick a camera profile, right? Landscape. And the histogram tells me that this one is a little bit flat. So I can do things like increase the contrast or increase the blacks and the whites, okay? This one works really great to show you how this black slider works on color. Watch the intensity of the sky, okay? See that? Much more blue, and I haven't touched the saturation slider. Always check the clipping warnings. There's a little bit right here on the bird. So I have my finger on that J key, and I just bring the highlight slider down just enough to get rid of the clipping. And it's also affected the sky nicely, right? I'm just pressing the space bar to zoom in and out. Again, these are things that I do on the keyboard, and I have my hand and fingers on the keyboard while I have my hand on the mouse, okay? So I use the J key for the clipping warnings. I use the backslash key for before and after, okay? And spacebar to zoom in and out, okay? You can also just click on the image like this, okay? But now we need to deal with the spots from the dirt on the sensor. Luckily, Luminar has built in some automated tools to help you with things like this. So the erase tool will do just that. It will erase things that you don't want. It comes with two automated ones or AI ones. Object removal, remember, if it's not visible, the little opening section here, okay, unfold it. Now you see two buttons, remove power lines and remove dust spots. Watch the magic happen when I click this. This one is amazing. See it working? It says removing. Look at that. It got 90% of the spots. Okay, there's still a little bit stuff down here, and I can just choose the spots that I want and then just erase them. There's a couple of tips I'll give you when using the erase tool is always zoom in. Okay, so if you want to erase things like this, zoom in to 100% so that you can see the image better and you'll get a much better erase. The erase tool in Luminar gets a bad rap, and people say, online, you'll say, oh, it doesn't work as well. It's not so good because they're trying to use it zoomed out, right? When you're zoomed out, you're not seeing the pixels close enough, okay? And neither is Luminar. So zoom in and do yourself a favor. Okay, so really quickly, we've gone from a complete disaster to something that has more color, intensity, and lack of spots. Now, I've purposely not removed these ones over here because the next thing I want to talk about is cropping. Okay, so let's talk about what you need to do on the image. Things like dust spots are obvious, but how do you know where to start if you have an image and you haven't edited it yet? Okay, well, let's take a look at this one, for example. Okay, so I'm just going to do a real quick develop. So let's do preset. Landscape actually gives us some nice color on the houses. So does portrait. Let's go with portrait. And then I'm just going to brighten it ever so slightly. But what I want to do is start to look at the image in a way that will help you figure out what you need to do next. Okay. Picking the camera profile, that's an easy one. Okay. But how do you know where to start when you're editing this image? So let me show you my upside down trick. When you open the crop tool, it's up here at the top, right above layer properties in the histogram. Okay. There's an option here to rotate. So when you rotate it twice, your image will be upside down. This is what we want for the moment. Okay. Once it's applied, press F on the keyboard to go full screen. Now we're looking at the image upside down without any distractions. The reason that you want to do this is your eye then gets fooled. So when you've taken an image, you know what the subject is. It's most likely the two dogs and the lady, right? But when you look at it upside down, where does your eye go automatically? Quickly, tell me in the chat, where does your eye go in this image when we're looking at it upside down? I would hazard a guess that most of us are going to have the same answer. Where does your eye go first and where does it go second? Okay. If your eye goes not to the subject first, that's the place where you start your editing. Okay. Let me check the chat here. All right. So tell me in the chat, where does your eye go on this image? Does it go to the car? Does it go to the lady? Does it go to the dogs? Or does it go somewhere else? Does it go to one of the houses? Rob, can you say something in the chat? Let me know the chat's working. You guys are awful quiet over there. Okay, Dak the Quack says it goes to the car. Okay, so there's 4 things in an image that will draw your attention. One of them is intense color, so that's why your eye is going to the car. But where else does it go? Does anybody's eye go to the sky down here? This big white blobby area? Deb does. Okay, so Deb says goes to the car. Absolutely. Okay. That's where my eye goes as well. Okay. Where does it go, Rob? Where does your eye go? So how we fix that, right? There's twofold. So press F again to get out of full screen mode, and then just undo the crop to put it back right side up. So we could do a lot of work trying to pull down the detail in that sky like I did in the winter image, or we could make our lives a whole lot easier and just crop it, okay? So while we're in here in the crop tool, okay, there's something called composition AI. So if you click this button, Luminar will analyze your image and crop it to a suggested amount. Okay, so it's come in a little bit. I'm actually going to go farther with it. And you can also change the aspect ratio. So this pull down menu here is original camera aspect ratio. So if I try and crop this into a square, for example, okay, I can't because it keeps this size, it keeps this shape, okay? So if you want a square, for example, you'd have to pick that aspect ratio. But I'm just going to go back here and I'm going to do free because I want to crop out the sky completely. So I'm just clicking and holding this to move it around. Okay. So I want no sky showing. I'm going to come all the way down, maybe to the top of the railing. I'll see how that looks. Okay. If that's too busy still, I might even come down farther. Then there's some wires over here on the right side. So let's get rid of those. Okay. If stuff is in your image that doesn't make sense, honestly, make your life a whole lot easier. Do I want to get rid of the oil stain on the road here, right here? No problem. Crop it out. We don't need all this foreground here, okay? By having a lot of foreground in front of your images, it means that it takes the eye longer to get to them. Rob, could you please share the link to the other video on the upside down trick and the one on cropping? We did a whole live stream on cropping your images and why to crop and how to crop. That's another hour and a half or so that you can go watch if you want to get more tips on effective cropping. So cropping to enhance your image, okay? Now on this left-hand side, see this thing over here, this wire and whatnot? Again, make your life easier. Let's just have the blue house on this side, right? Let's apply the crop. And you can do that just by clicking the button or hitting return. I'm still not happy with this little bit up here. So Rob often says, I see things that he doesn't see. So I want to make sure you see that. So there's a little bit of this balcony and then a white strip there. And I want to get rid of that white strip. So I'm just going to come down a little bit more. There we go. It's still kind of there. But it's not bad. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, goodness. Excuse me. Okay, so now look at the difference. Now where does our eye go? Okay, we can also look at it upside down. Once more, I'm going to come in all the way here. Okay, let's look at this one upside down with these croppings applied. Okay, one more time. F for full screen. Now where does your eye go? Okay, so before Mike was saying the blown out sky, Rowena said to the white. Right now, where does your eye go? It should go right to the car, and then secondly to the dogs. Okay, your eye is drawn to, I mentioned 4 things. Those are intense or bright color, especially warm colors, areas of contrast, so the dog contrasts against the road, bright areas, which is why our eye went to the sky, and the area of most sharpness, which is why we come back to the car. So the car has all of those things. It has bright highlights, it has bright color, it has contrast between black and white, and it's in sharp focus. Okay, so that's why your eye goes to the car. Let's just rotate that back the right direction. All right, so cropping made a big difference here. Then from here, we can edit to bring the car out even more. So start by looking at your image upside down. If you don't know where to begin, look at it upside down and see where your eye goes. There's also a little trick where you can kind of squint your eyes a little bit and sit back from it. right? If you're too close, you're not going to see it. It's kind of like you can't see the forest for the trees, right? So if you're not seeing what stands out, lean back in your chair, squint your eyes, and you'll see everything kind of go out of focus. Then you'll see what stands out because it's bright. Okay. Let's see. Where did I leave off? Where's my mouse here? Any questions so far? Are you getting any benefits? Have you learned anything? That was a lot of questions on my part, but have you learned anything so far, right? We're already 1 hour into this, and we've talked about develop raw versus develop, shooting raw versus JPEG, catalogs and databases, histograms and clipping warnings, camera profiles, and now cropping and where to begin your edits, okay? Let's do one more where we talk about looking at the image upside down. Okay, here's another example. It's a raw image, but let's look at it upside down. Okay, it looks like it's a market. I'm going to guess in Morocco. Okay, it looks very Moroccan, right? Yes, tell us in the chat what you have learned. So now do the same analysis. Where does your eye go in this image of the market stall? Okay, there's a lot going on. So remember those 4 things. Remember those 4 things. Your eye goes to bright areas, contrasty areas, areas of intense color, and things that are sharp. So what in this image has those things? Where are the bright areas? Where's the intense color? Where's the sharpness? Okay. Mike says, loves the flip trick. Awesome. AK, AO, AO. Great job. Learning a lot. Thanks. Serge says, good training. Thanks. Thank you, Serge. I'm glad you're enjoying it. So where does your eye go? Here. And where would you begin to edit this photo? Okay. My eye goes everywhere. Okay, so the challenge with this one is that there's bright areas here, on the roof here, over here, this towel. So if the subject is this stall with the market, it's not getting my attention. Okay. So a lot can be done here with cropping, right? Again, so we could crop this part out so the cafe is gone. Right. There's also a horizon adjustment for straightening images, part of the crop tool. Okay. Okay, I'm going a little straighter. I can get rid of this bright area over here. Okay, so that simplifies it to some degree, but there's still lots of stuff taking my attention away from this market stall. Okay, that helps, right? See that? Simplify. Okay, that helps. Then if we go into develop raw, right? Again, we're in develop raw. We can pick a camera profile, maybe that will help decrease the contrast. Okay. We could try monochrome, which is kind of interesting. Neutral. Okay. So neutral actually is helping to pick up some of those tones. Vivid goes the wrong direction. We have more contrast. Okay. So let's go with camera neutral. Okay. Then there's a couple of things we could try that are automated, right? So up at the top here, auto adjust. This is a new thing in Luminar Neo. So if we click auto adjust, it affects curves and these sliders in here. Let's see how it does. Okay, you can even tell it if you like the result. So what it's done, now I have to give feedback. Okay, so what it's done is minus the exposure a little bit, brought the highlights down, brought the shadows up, and if we look at curves, it made some adjustments in here as well. Okay, I'm not going to cover curves in this lesson today, but I do cover it in the course as an entire lesson by itself. Right, now there's a couple of other things once these things have been applied that I need to look at, and that is you want to look for problems in your editing. Up at the top here, can you see the problem? Okay, so the sky has been darkened, but there's this little outline around the top of this tent that makes it look fake. Okay, so there's something inside of develop raw that you want to check, and that is under optics. This is also only available on raw files. You will not see these two things, distortion correction and chromatic aberration, unless you have a raw file, okay? And unless you're on Develop Raw. So chromatic aberration is where the colors in your image are not aligned correctly. So the red, green, blue are not aligned correctly. And often you'll get this kind of look, okay? I could try auto defringe. Let's see if that does anything. So none of these things are fixing the problem. So this problem has been introduced another way, okay? So either I need to scale it back. Yep, there we go. Okay, so because it took the highlights, the auto adjust, it took the highlights down so far, okay, it's actually created that bit of a halo around the sky. So instead of going all the way, I'm just going to go part way, okay? And then we'll go see what Enhance AI will do with this one. Okay, so let's take this one up. And I recommend going to extremes with things and then dialing it back. Okay, so go and see what it does. And then you can mask it as well. So this one has masking too. Okay, because you don't want to do stuff like that. Okay, so now our shadows are the same tone as the highlights, which is false. And the sky looks completely bizarre. Okay, so we can mask this and also just bring it back down a little bit. Okay, so I don't want it on the sky. Okay, I don't want this applying on the sky. So masking comes with something called Mask AI. So there's a lot of tools inside Luminar Neo that are called AI that use artificial intelligence without generating something new. So don't be afraid that it's going to create something fake. All it's doing is analyzing your image. So Mask AI, when we click it, is looking for elements in your image. So you see how it's found architecture, man-made ground, and sky. Okay, so when I click on sky, it's going to add the mask just to the sky. Now remember, I want it not applying there. Okay, so I'm going to have to do a trick to invert it, but that's easy enough. And maybe I don't want it on the sidewalk either. So see how it's picked up man-made ground? It's done a nice job there. Now all we have to do is go back to the masking tools. And if I show the mask, click this invert button, now it's going to apply to everything opposite, like so. So now when we go back to adjustments, it's not on the ground down here, and it's not on the sky. It's only affecting the middle section of the image, okay? Like so. And if it doesn't detect the sky in your image, this one will be grayed out, right? So really quickly, we've managed to pick up a lot of detail in the stall, but there's still this light area over here. So what can we do? Go back to Develop Raw again. Let's take the whites down. Let's check the clipping warnings. Yep, we're definitely clipping. Okay, so let's take the whites down. Let's take the highlights down. There we go. That's helping to solve that problem. And I only want it to apply in these areas on the side. Okay, so now we have to mask it into those areas. Might give them a little bit of black as well. One thing to note is when you start doing this kind of editing, your color tends to go a bit wonky. So you have to really watch that you don't oversaturate things. So I'm going to use this time a linear gradient. So a linear gradient is one that's drawn from the edge of the image in. So it gives you these two lines again, which is the fade area. And I'm going to fade it in so. So it starts at 100% over here, 0% on this side, and this is the fade area. Okay. So I want to make sure that this bright area is getting all of the effects. There we go. Okay. When we turn it off or go back to the masking tools, now we can see that it's just darkening that side of the image. Okay. If I wanted to also apply over here, I can go back to masking and just paint it in with a brush in here. Okay. Like so. Oops. See, I made a mess on the sky. There we go. So now we're getting a lot closer. But I mentioned this color, you want to really make sure you don't go over the top with color, right? So be very careful when you're punching things up. Okay, let's talk about presets now, okay? So presets come in the middle here. And all the presets are is something that allows you to get your edits done quickly if you want to just apply something and move on. Okay. Let's start with this one. There we go. Okay, so we go into presets, and immediately you'll see at the top here some suggestions. I don't know why it's suggesting urban style, but right, easy landscapes. That makes more sense. Okay, so it's a landscape. These presets are designed for landscapes. It also gives you additional options to purchase presets. But my recommendation is not to go crazy buying a lot of presets. My recommendation is to have some basic ones and then make your own, because I'll show you how you can do that really quickly. Okay, once this collection has loaded, there's 6 in here. When you hover over, you get a preview. Okay, so I can see if any of these are to my liking. Ooh, look at that. Forest stream. Well, indeed, it kind of is a forest stream. Or we could get something that almost looks a bit faded out. That's kind of nice as well. Likewise, long exposure. For me, the long exposure one is nice, but the colors are going a bit over the top. Not a problem. Just dial this slider down a little bit to lower the intensity of the preset. Okay. Likewise, I could do the same with the forest stream one. But you'll notice that if I apply one preset, okay, and then click on a different one, it overwrites everything. Okay, so you can't put one preset on top of another like you can in some other photo editing programs. You have to only pick one. Okay, so when I apply it, I can dial it down, and then you can go to edit and continue from here, or you could tweak the edits that came from the preset. Okay, so this is another great way to learn editing and teach yourself what these tools are doing. Okay, so apply a preset, then go to edits and see what it's done. Okay, has it done anything in Develop Raw? Minor. Okay, but it didn't apply a camera profile. So you could actually come down here and say, well, I'm going to put the camera profile on. Okay, then you can check what it's done with all of these other tools and either dial them back or intensify them. Okay, notice the color has gone really wonky. Okay, landscape. This one you have to be really careful with. This is one that I always suggest you change the foliage enhancer to -30 in the color range, because otherwise you end up with sort of neon green leaves, and keep this one super low. Okay, I don't know that it needs dehaze on this one, so we're editing as we go. Right, and color, this one is where I would actually, it's made some adjustments here to tint the colors, right? But I would actually dial the saturation down a little bit overall. And you can use these ones to dial the saturation of the blue down a bit, okay? Because it's gone a little over the top, like so. So there we go. That's better. So quickly, a preset, and then just tweaking the edits that were done with the preset, and you've got a really nice finished image. Remember to check the clipping warnings. Aha! See, we need to bring those highlights down. Now I have 2 choices. I can apply Develop again and just put it on the highlights here and mask it if I need to, because it's affecting the sky again, so I don't want to affect the sky. And I think I might want to brighten the shadows a little bit. So I'm going to do a mask again and find the sky and then just flip it. Okay, because I don't want it on the sky. There we go. Much better. Right? I do find the image is tilting as well. So even in images that don't have buildings, if you have a landscape with a horizon, the horizon should be fairly straight. So you can use this horizon alignment in the crop tool, right? And it will analyze the image looking for either verticals or a horizon. And in this case, it did a really nice job finding the horizon and straightening it. Likewise, if you have buildings that we talked about, like let's go back to this one here, right? Let's go to the crop tool again. if you have buildings, I feel like this one is leaning a little bit. So let's just adjust this one. I could try the horizon alignment, or I can just click outside of the bounding box here. And when you click, you can rotate. Okay, so now I'm just looking at the grid lines and lining them up with the buildings. I'm looking at this line right here. So I'm just going until that is straight. Now the car looks crooked because the road is leaning, okay? So we want the road being crooked is okay. Buildings, not so much. See that? Straighten the buildings, okay? Now let's look at another building one and talk about cropping on this one, okay? We also could talk about erasing power lines. In this one, I wouldn't erase the power lines because it's actually framing the church steeple, okay? So I would leave it, but let's just see how well Luminar does on removing power lines. It actually does a really amazing job. Let's see. What am I saying, right? Look at that. Now it did remove a little bit of the tree, right? But that's easily fixed. You can just restore that, okay? And I would probably go a little farther and remove some of the things off the post here. But as I said, I would actually leave the power lines on this one because it does a really nice job framing the image, okay? But notice, even though this is a raw file, it doesn't say develop raw anymore. How come? Because I applied erase first, okay? So I can do two things. I can either come back down here underneath erase, right? Or I can delete erase and come back here and develop raws back again, okay? So let's do all the same steps and follow through. This one's not doing a whole great deal, but let's choose landscape, okay? Check the clipping warnings. Nothing is clipping. Oh, I think it needs to catch up to me. The image is definitely not catching up to me. Let me just come back to this one. Okay, I'm going to reset it. Let me show you that. So if you've made mistakes and you don't like your edits, you can just click this little icon here and choose revert to original. Okay, it should be back to the original now. And I could choose the camera profile. Let's see if it's catching up. For some reason, it seems to be lagging behind on me on this one because it should be overly bright now. I'll come back to this one in a minute. I wanted to talk about buildings and straightening. Okay, so this one here, okay, even though it's not an architectural image, right? The building is clearly leaning, and you also get converging lines, which is perspective when you're shooting upwards, okay? So even though this is a JPEG, we can still use develop, and develop raw has a tool, or develop, pardon me, has a tool. It's in develop, even if it's a JPEG, called transform at the bottom here. And it's designed to fix exactly that, building distortion, okay? So if we click that, remember I said optics doesn't have all the options for JPEGs, okay? So the distortion one is gone, as is chromatic aberration. So now if I click this one for transform, look at that. Crooked, not crooked. And the verticals are parallel. How brilliant is that? Okay, really quick. And then a quick crop. We can go freeform, get rid of this car on this side over here. Oops, my mouse has stopped working. My mouse has quit on me. Do I have another mouse? Hang on a second. I gotta see if I have another mouse that is gonna work. Come on, mouse. My mouse has died on me. While I'm figuring this out, any questions in the chat? Oh, come on, mouse. There we go. Okay. Let's come back here. Okay, so cropping. I want to go freeform, and I just want to get rid of that vehicle over there. There we go. Okay, so the transform tool in develop is really helpful, especially when you're dealing with architectural elements or straight lines. Okay, Let me show you a couple more examples, right? Here's one that I've actually edited in the past in one of our other YouTube lives. So we did iconic locations, right? Look at the building distortion on this one, right? This is the edit that I ultimately ended up doing in the live previously, right? I took out the people, I did a sky replacement, but you can see the building is still tilting, right? So if we want to correct that, we can use the transform tool and voila, look at that. Okay. I did do some gen erase on this one. You can see in the file name to get rid of those people, right? But if I want to do the same thing on this one, get rid of the distortion, there you go. Okay. So the develop raw tool is really, really powerful. Do we want landscape? There we go. Right. So really, really powerful for controlling a lot of things. Color, contrast, right? And distortion. Speaking of color, this is going a little over the top for me. So for me, that is too saturated, especially on the blue. So I would dial that back, right? Remember how I said I rarely use saturation except for minus? This is one of those times. So before and after, right? All right, let's see if this one is cut up yet. Okay, there we go. There we go. That's better. Okay, so landscape. I think landscape does a nice job on that. Okay, I want to brighten it a little bit, but let's check the clippings. So I'm going to brighten it overall. Okay, and then see how the church steeple starts to clip. So I can brighten it and then bring the highlights back down. So this is what I call the editing dance. You have to move one slider and then you may have to adjust or move another one. Okay, we could also use the white balance preset. Okay, let's try daylight. Or if I want it a bit warmer, we can go cloudy. I think daylight was pretty good, actually. Right. Once again, we can do a crop to make sure that it's straight and check building distortion. Actually, building distortion is back in Develop Raw. So let's go do that. Transform. You know, this one, notice how it's cutting off the top of this pole, okay? We have to make a decision. Do I don't like it doing that, right? I either want to see the light or get rid of it, okay? So I kind of do like the building distortion correction. So I'm going to do it and like that and then go into crop a bit more, okay? Because I want to get rid of this then. So I'm going to go crop. Make sure it's straight, first of all. There we go. Now, when it's doing the automated straightening, you want to double check it because anything that's in the middle of the image should be straight up and down. And I don't think it is, right? There we go. That's better. So I'm just double checking because it could be fooled by one of these poles that's tilting, okay? Now I'm going to leave it at the original aspect ratio. And I'm going to come in a little bit tighter just to get rid of the top pole, like so. Let's keep the space there. And I don't need all this space over here on the left. This whole lot of this pink building and the foreground. So remember what I said about lots of foreground. When you have lots of foreground, it just feels like the subject is farther away, right? Now I'm deciding about, do I want to crop into that black plaque or not? Let's try something like that. Let's see how that looks. So I like the framing of the steeple inside of those power lines, so I don't want to get rid of them, and that looks like a better edit. The only other thing I would do on this, there's lots of other things I could do, okay, but other thing that I would do, which I do on almost all of my images, and that is a vignette. Okay, so a vignette is typically darkening the edges, but you want to do it in such a way that it is not obvious. Okay, so I'll show you what a bad vignette looks like. Okay, that's a bad vignette because you can literally see where it is. Okay, that's a bad vignette. So the key to a good vignette is keeping this feather slider up high. But let me show you my my vignetting trick. So I bring the feather all the way down to -100. Now we can see that means that it's got a hard edge. So the fall off from dark to light is immediate, right? Now I can adjust the shape and the size, okay? So I can make it rounder. And I can also position it. That's something you cannot do in some other softwares. You can't do that in Lightroom, for example. So I can move the vignette around and say, no, I want it more like this. So I want to darken everything on the outside of this oval, okay? Now that I've got it where I want it in the size and shape that I want it, then I bring the feather up high, usually over 75 or 80, and the amount slider back up to something subtle, okay? Something like that. Now it doesn't look like that's doing anything, but watch the before and after, okay? It should be subtle just to draw the eye in towards the middle of the image a bit more, right? Let's try enhance AI on this one and finish it up. So it does a nice job. Okay, again, take things to extreme and then dial it back somewhere in the middle. Right, sky enhancer, again, you have to be really careful because it does a nice job on the lower part of the sky, but look what it's doing up here. There's all kinds of issues. Now I can see that there's potential chromatic aberration as well, so I might have to go back to develop raw. Right, in this one, we can actually, let's take it up high, mask it off the top of the image. Okay, so I'm going to use a linear gradient and say I want to include most of this image, but not this top part. It did not like my mask. It sure did not like my mask. There we go. Let's try that again. Something about this image that it seems to not be affecting my, it's not taking the image, the edits very well. So I'm going to apply that and then we'll come back to see how it looks. But generally, with the exception of that bright blue sky at the top, I think that's a pretty good edit. Okay. I might even come even closer on the sides and crop in even more. And I might go off aspect ratio so that I have something that's even more framed up like this and simplified to just the middle of the image like this. I can't decide. I think both have merit. Okay. Okay. How are we doing? We're almost at an hour and a half. I want to show you one other thing to watch out for with presets. Okay. So if you were going to apply a preset to something, let's just do a quick edit on this one because this one is a great one for cropping as well. Okay. So I'm going to do a straighten on this one. And then I'm going to come in to crop out this guy. Okay. I don't want the guy in the shot. And let's make sure that it's straight in the middle. There we go. Okay. About like so, right? So cropping is nice. But now let's say I want to apply a preset to spark this image up. Okay, so I'm going to go to presets. Let's see what it suggests. Big screen, urban style. Let's try urban style. Okay, so let's hover over each of these. Ooh, Old Town. Okay, Old Town. That's not bad. It's got names of towns. That's kind of interesting. All right, let's try the Old Town one. Okay. So now, let's say I like this one, okay? But I want to tweak it a little bit. Maybe I want to apply a vignette. Really just quickly like so. And maybe I want to punch up the image a little bit of shadows. And I feel like it's a little bit red. Okay, so I've made some edits now. This is where I'm at, okay? It's a little bit red for my liking, but let's just go with that, okay? Now, if I come back and say, well, I don't like that preset. I'm going to try something different. Let's see. It's not really a landscape. let's go with something. Let's try one of these ones. Okay. Let's see how they are. Right. When we choose this one, remember how I said it writes over. So anything that I've done, including applying the vignette, will be written over. You'll notice that the only thing it didn't write over was the crop. So you can crop and then apply a preset and it will keep the crop, but my vignette's gone. Okay. So that's fine. Right. So just note that when you are working with presets, they write over everything except crop. Okay. So if you've done some major erasing or you've done some major work on things that you don't want to lose, don't go back and apply another preset. Okay. There's actually a better way to do it. If you want to try a different kind of edit, you can make what's called a virtual copy. Okay. This is a feature of a database kind of photo editor that we talked about earlier. So you can make another thumbnail and then you can reset the edits. Okay. So revert to original and then go apply another preset. Actually, I don't even need to reset them. I'm going to undo. So I'm going to undo, which was Command or Control Z or Z. And let's just pick another one. I want something really dramatic. Let's just see. I want something really dramatic. Let's go with monochrome. This is monochrome portrait. I actually have some of my own. Let's see. Yeah, I should have mine in here somewhere. Can't even find my own portraits. They should be in here, but they are not. Oh, they're in here. There we go. Okay, so I have, these are ones that I made for portraits, okay? But they work on anything. So I know that I have one that's a punchy black and white, and I know I have one that's also kind of grunged up a little bit, which might work well on this image of India. Okay, so punchy black and white, that's really contrasty. Okay, Sunset Magic is a little bit warm. Ooh, that one's kind of nice. Okay, Antique Touch, I know gives a brown tone. And I'm just kind of going through. That one's kind of cool as well. Okay, so if I want a completely different look for these, right, I can go with this preset knowing that it will keep the crop, but it's going to write over all the other edits. Okay, let me dial it back just a little bit. So now I have two different images, even though the raw file has not been duplicated. Okay, so that's the important thing to note about virtual copies is the first one, you'll always see a number 1 on the thumbnail. Okay, so when we see this one, hopefully in a second, there's a 1 here. That's the original. And then your virtual copy will show a number 2. Okay, so now I have two different edits. I can export or save them both, which brings me to how do I get my images and my edits out of Luminar Neo? Okay, so to get your edits out, you need to do an export. Okay, so export is kind of like save as, meaning you have to export it with the settings applied that you've done inside Luminar Neo. So I can select both of these. I've got them highlighted here. And then the export button at the top. When you click it now, there's some presets that you can choose. So you can choose JPEG 100%, JPEG lower quality, and so on, okay, or TIFF. Or I can choose a new export and choose my settings. So I have an entire video on some of the things that I've talked about in this lesson today. Rob, you're going to be busy here. You're going to talk about, you're going to need to share, let's see, what have I talked about? You've done the upside down trick, the cropping video. If I have anything on masking, share that. And also the exporting from Luminar Neo. We're going to share, that's the one you're going to need. Okay. So I'm just going to save this in here for now. And underneath here, if you don't see the option, so first you need to decide where you're going to save it. I'm just going to put it in my downloads for now because I'm not going to save these. But you can choose your options, right? You can choose your file format. In this case, I want a JPEG. You can choose whether or not to resize it or export the original size. If I want it for Facebook, for example, I will always size it to 2048 on the long side. I will go 100% quality with a little bit of sharpening. Okay, so these are all settings that I go over in the export video that Rob is about to share with you in the chat or in the description if you're watching this later. Okay, so when I click save, it's going to put those two images in my download folder. So let's just go check my downloads. Okay, there's the one and there's the other. Okay, so now you can see that I indeed have two different versions of that image exported, right? You can also export from any step along the way, right? So if you want to export only after 2 steps, you can do that. Here's another one where I've done pre-editing on this one. I did editing on this one prior, right, to darken the highlights. So I could export both of them if I want to. Okay, or if I want the color version of this and the black and white version. Okay, so export just means save as. You can export in any size and multiple different formats. All right, let me just see how I'm doing here. The only other things I want to quickly cover today are a couple of the other smart tools. Okay, so let's talk about structure, for example. Okay, here's another one that has, that's not the image I wanted. Here's another one that has some issues with contrast. Coincidentally, I just want to mention that all of these ones that are my images, these ones at the top here that I've been using, this one here, and this yellow tower, a lot of these are part of the Luminar Neo course. So when you buy the course, you get the same files to work with so that you can follow along with what I'm doing exactly. All right, so with this one, I'm just going to stick with the Adobe standard on this one because I have to put the Fuji profiles in. These are custom ones. Actually, ProNeg is not bad. I'm trying to minimize the contrast here because we've got clipping highlights and clipping shadows. Okay, so I can bring the highlights down and the shadows up a little bit, but I don't want to go too far because this is, again, what you create with a disaster. Okay, so yes, I've solved the clipping issues, but she doesn't look so good. Okay, that's a mess. This is a disaster. Okay, so don't do that. Okay, I'm going to come back here again, highlights. Let's just solve the clipping. I'm not worried about the hat so much. I'm looking at her face and the blouse, okay, because I can solve the hat with a vignette. And then I'm going to brighten it overall a little bit. Now we get those clippings back again. But remember, we can do that with another mask. Okay, so there we go. Let's try Enhance AI. So I just want to point out the AI tools. So Enhance AI and Structure AI in this section. Okay, what they mean by that in these cases, it's analyzing your image, helping to do what it thinks it needs done on this image. Notice the sky one is grayed out, okay, because it doesn't recognize there's any sky, but it's doing a nice job on the background here. I'm just going to go part way. Structure AI, I applied this one quickly earlier, but I want to show it to you on the portrait image or person. Okay, so when I apply Structure AI, it makes everything sort of crunchy, but you'll notice it hasn't affected her as much. That's because the AI is analyzing the image and it's not applying it on people as much as it is elsewhere. Okay, so on this one, I actually don't even like it that much. It's doing kind of a nice job on the bottom, so I might just mask it with the linear gradient to the bottom of the image. Okay, so it's just kind of giving a little bit more texture to her arm at the bottom. Okay, some of the other AI ones include Sky AI for changing or replacing a sky, Twilight Enhancer, which none of these we've covered, Atmosphere AI, and Water Enhancer. These all analyze the image in a landscape looking for certain elements. Okay, Relight AI is helping to add light or remove light to the background and the foreground. Magic Light makes sparkles on your highlights. I don't know if it'll do it on this one. Let's just see. No, it's not picking up any highlights. And of course, the entire portrait section, most of which are AI. So these ones will only affect portraits. So you can do things like brighten the face, brighten her eyes, and so on. Enlarge the eyes, whiten the eyes, whiten the teeth. Okay, so these are all things that are helping to analyze looking for people. Skin AI is about smoothing the skin. Okay, so anytime any of these tools say AI, all they're doing is analyzing the image, looking for something, looking for certain kinds of elements. Okay, Studio Light is another one. It's not necessarily AI, and you can use it on things that are besides portraits, but it allows you to add a little spot of light. And what I want to do is kind of try and brighten her a little bit without affecting the background. Okay. So I want this a bit smoother. There we go. And I just want it on her. So I'm just going to do like so. Don't want it on her top. So see what it's doing? Just brightening her face ever so slightly. Okay. So all of these things are designed, anything that says AI is designed to analyze the image. Okay. I'm doing my feather trick because I want to darken the hat. Okay, so see how I can put the vignette off center because I want to darken this hat in this bottom corner. Okay, even a raw file, I'm still not getting full detail in this hat. So you can see the difference between having sort of blowout version. Right? I might even do something on this one, and I'm just kind of showing you what's possible here now where I blur the corners because I really don't like this hat. So I might do something where I mask it to just the corner like so, and I have to invert it. So I want to just blur these edges a little bit as I want the hat blurred. Let's see how that looks. So see how I'm just blurring the hat. Since there's no detail there anyways, let's just blur it. Great. So there's a before and after. Remember the things that take your eye when you look at the image upside down. Okay. All right. What else did I want to show? The other AI tools are these ones here, and these are the generative tools. So generative means that you're going to be enhancing the image in a different way. It means you're going to erase something that you don't want in your image, or you're going to create something. Okay. For example, I'm just going to take this in here just to show you what's possible. Now it's going to be probably something weird, but if I want to, let's say I want to add a dog sleeping at his feet over here. Okay. So what you have to do is draw it. Let's put the dog over here. Okay. So you want to type in words that are not verbs. So you just type in dog asleep on the ground, right? What you want, and it will generate something that it thinks is appropriate for the words that you typed in. It's a prompt, okay? So if you've done any type of AI creation, this is creating something out of nothing. You do need to have the professional plan or subscription to have this option, right? And there's a dog, okay? So there we go. And then you're free to edit the image from here, okay? Looks like he's got too many legs, but it's actually not too bad. You know, he looks a little ruffled and rumpled, which is fine for Cuba. The size relationship, he's a big dog, but I would probably de-sharpen him a little bit because this guy isn't as sharp. So when you're doing things like this, you just have to really watch out that it matches, right? But it's not bad. Okay, so the generative tools are AI, right? Merging tools like HDR, focus stacking, and panorama. Those are more advanced tools where you're working with multiple images. Upscale helps you to enlarge an image that was too small, such as a phone image or something like that. Just looking to see if there's anything else that I wanted to demonstrate. I think I've got most of the things that I wanted to demonstrate. We could take a look at how the power line works on this one as well. Okay, so remember if I use erase first, it's going to get rid of develop raw, but let's do power lines and see how it goes. You're welcome, Alvin. A-OK. I'm glad that you're A-OK. Thanks for joining in. Oh, 11:30. You must be over in Europe. You'll watch the rest on the replay. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining. I'm glad we have so many first-time joiners today. I see a few other people as well. Look at that. Okay, so one click, power lines gone. Super great, right? And once again, develop raw is gone. So this time, instead of removing erase, I'm just going to go down a step and do my edits here. Okay, so I'm just going to give him a bit more punch. This is one that Relight works really well on. Okay, wait for my erase to be applied. For the Relight tool, follow my YouTube channel as well. We've got lots of videos on Luminar Neo, and join us every second Sunday. This is an extra one this month, but I'll be back next week with another YouTube live on a different topic. So last week, what did we do last week, Rob? Last week, was it street grunge? No, we did special effects and street grunge were the last two lives. So it's always a different topic and there's always something to learn. Usually in the live, I am also doing Lightroom as well. So if you are a Lightroom user, you can pick up some Lightroom tips. So here I am brightening the guy and darkening the background at the same time. Okay. But I don't want it on the foreground because it's getting too bright down here. So I don't want to brighten this part of the foreground. Like so. Just like that. So really quickly, you can use Develop Raw, Erase, and Relight to make something like this. Again, all of these things are taught in my Luminar Neo course. I teach the total Luminar Neo suite from beginning to end. So every single tool we cover: develop raw, enhance, erase, structure, color, black and white. Each lesson is a comprehensive. You get my raw files, including this one. So what I'm demonstrating here, you'll be able to reproduce. Some of the images today were subscriber submitted images. Those ones are not available, but the ones that are included with the course are exactly the ones that I'm using to demonstrate in the course. So when you see me in a lesson, you can do exactly the same thing with exactly the same image to follow along. Right? We go through every single tool, including the ones in the catalog module. And then I do some things like backing up, how to work with multiple catalogs, and more. Advanced editing, such as layers and composites, as well as putting together panoramas, putting together HDR, and complex things like Pano HDR, combining those tools. So if you'd like to get a full, complete Luminar Neo education, check out our Luminar Neo course on sale. Put the link in the description below, and if you're watching this live still, in the chat. It's 30% off till the end of the day, Monday, which is July 14th, 2025. If you miss out on that sale, check the description area below in this video for a coupon that you can use for a smaller discount. So let me come back over here. So I really hope you've all enjoyed this presentation. You've indicated, many of you, that you have enjoyed it. So thank you very much for joining in. If it's your first time here on our YouTube channel, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. If you found it valuable, tell somebody else, tell a friend, and tell them to tell a friend. That's how we can grow our YouTube channel and reach more people like you that need some help with Luminar Neo or photo editing in general. Like I said, I do teach Lightroom and Photoshop as well. And I have a Lightroom video, which I posted earlier this week on the updates to Lightroom Classic in 2025. So if you are using Lightroom with Luminar as a plugin, I got you as well. Right? That's also another lesson in the course. Thanks so much for your comments. Let me put that down here. I'm glad you all enjoyed the video. We'll be back next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time with a new topic. Watch for that to be posted on our YouTube Live. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss anything. I'm glad you had a good editing overview, Deb, and take care, everyone, and we'll see you hopefully next week or in our DPM community, which you can also check out. There's a description in the chat. It's a private place where you could come and share your images and feel safe and comfortable with a really warm, welcoming community. Take care, everyone.